Well, good afternoon, everyone. As you're just getting into the webinar here, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Tell us your name and what program you're with. So I just want to go over a few housekeeping items before we officially kick off the session today. About 24 hours after the session ends, you should get a proof of participation in your inbox, and that will be coming directly from Zoom. So you can be on the lookout for that. Also, as soon as you leave the webinar today, you will get an evaluation. And we would really appreciate it if you could fill that out and give us your feedback. We do have a closing session at 1:30 today, closing out our adult and education and family literacy week and our VTI week. So we invite you to that webinar as well. And I'm going to launch a poll right now just to see who's in the room. And I appreciate it if you could answer that. So here we go. And I will share the results with you in a moment. Looks like we're up to 17 participants with us today, so that's great. We have 62% of our attendees today are instructors. We have an instructional specialist, an intake and assessment specialist, and a transition specialist with us as well. We'll share the results so everyone can see. All right. So you can put comments or questions in the chat, and Tessa hopes to allow a few minutes at the end for questions. So feel free to do that, and I'll be helping her to monitor the chat. Well, we are so pleased today to have Tessa Ambrose with us from Hometown Connections, and her presentation is titled, How a Multi-Generational Approach to English Learning Can Remove Barriers with Connecting Newcomers with Our Community. So Tessa, I am going to turn it over to you and let you get started.
Great, thank you. So again, my name is Tessa Ambrose. I am the English Language Learning Program Manager at Solutions in Hometown Connections, which I'll just refer to as SHC from now on. Before coming to SHC, I taught at Northern Virginia Community College for over 10 years. And so it's been an exciting transition to serving newcomers in this particular role. So yeah, I'm here to talk a little bit about how SHC's multi-generational approach to English learning can remove barriers to connecting newcomers, at least that we're coming across with our community. So obviously it's in our name, Solutions in Hometown Connections. So I'm looking forward to getting started. Let's see, can we go to the next slide, Betsy? And then one after that, thank you. Great, so just a short preview to you about the questions that I'll try to answer. So how do we, as in SHC, how do we integrate English learning with multi-generational support? What is particularly distinct about our English language learning program? And how do we address the challenges and barriers to English learning that our students face? And lastly, what does it take for us as SHC? But I think this probably applies across the board to other similar organizations and English learning programs. What does it take to ensure the success of our programs and also this approach? Next slide, please. So just a quick introduction about who SHC is. We are an organization that started first as a group of volunteers who were basically tutors, and founded in 2017. And since our founding, we have served more than 2,000 refugees in various capacities. We incorporate, now we are a network of paid office staff, paid teachers, as well as many volunteers who continue to serve as tutors, and also assist with other, different SHC events that are happening in the community. So we are based in Riverdale, Maryland, and our mission is to engage those newcomers who are hard to reach, and who are often passed over by traditional ESL programming. And so these newcomers are typically very isolated, and essentially invisible members of the community. So many, we focus our efforts predominantly in Prince George's and Montgomery counties. There are fewer opportunities, especially for ESL in Prince George's. I saw there was someone from Prince George's Community College on here, and we try to refer people as much as we can to other resources as well. But our particular focus is on mothers and mothers with young children, so from the ages of 0 to 5. Next slide, please. So just giving a brief overview about what SHC's multi-generational approach is. So our largest program by far is the online English classes, which is the program that I particularly oversee. So these classes are designed for adult students, are free of charge, but our instructors are qualified and are paid, so they're professional instructors. Our program doubles down on literacy instruction in particular. So we have 4 levels of just beginning literacy classes. And the classes themselves are typically shorter than what other online ESL programs may offer, for the sole reason of making it accessible to mothers who have young children at home. And I think we can probably all understand why shorter is better when you've got kind of a lot of other things going on in your house. So that's the main one of the biggest programs that we offer. The tutoring is another kind of prong in the wheel. So our tutoring are all volunteers who are matched with students who are currently in our English classes. So they will meet either virtually or in person. So these tutors are either referred, teachers will refer students out for tutoring, or you have students who will initiate requests for tutors. And so again, they're really valuable part of our programming. So we do offer in-person classes, which we call welcome workshops, and we are revamping this for this fall to incorporate English instruction with cultural orientation. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but we use the Intercambio resources in order to do that. And lastly, we offer our other major program is the online preschool that we offer, which is also free and utilizes a professional instructor. And kind of alongside that, we offer child development screenings with many of our families, which is designed to identify any delays or concerns with cognitive or other kind of health issues to catch them early, so that we can kind of support them or refer them to people who are able to better support. Next one, thank you. All right, so obviously, all newcomers face challenges, because of the particular audience that or kind of group of people that we are seeking to serve. Women with young children. Many of the women have particular challenges. So They have those who have interrupted or limited education in their home countries will usually translate into lower levels of literacy, not only in their native language, but also in English. So, we see how this kind of leads to a downward spiral, where this prevents them obviously from accessing employment, but leads them to become ultimately socially isolated and cut off from the community, with very few avenues of support. So, at the end of the day, you see this trickling down into their children at home, where you may have unaddressed, mental health issues with the mother who, where this can kind of then affect children, in ways that could manifest in cognitive, social, or behavioral problems. Next slide, please. Thanks. So this is kind of where SHC tries to step in, with our programs. So again, the online English classes, the welcome workshops, the preschool, and the tutoring. So all of these things are designed to kind of encompass our multi-generational approach. So as mothers become more proficient in the English language and develop skills to navigate life in general in the United States, this leads them to be more fully connected with their families, and in their communities. And by communities, I mean not just people who speak their language, but the larger, either native speakers, or just people speaking different languages. And so, you have skill development through the English classes, but also, for children through the preschool classes. So together, the more that they're developing these skills, the more socially integrated they become. They're making connections in the community, and the support leads them to greater independence and empowerment, so they can eventually find employment, taking an active role, in particular, in their child's education needs, healthcare. So we're seeing how everyone, in the family is served, hopefully through our programming. Next slide, please. So I just want to give you a brief overview, because this is my wheelhouse, and this is, the focus of the trainings more generally is, what makes SHC's English language learning program distinct. So we, in our online classes, we serve around 330 students. These are predominantly Afghan women, and as I mentioned before, many of them have limited education in their home country, and there's a large need for basic literacy, phonics instruction. So as I mentioned, there are 4 class levels just that focus on beginning literacy. So we, students will start out from absolute 0 English written and oral proficiency through to high beginning / low intermediate. The idea being that once they kind of quote graduate from our program, they are ready to transition into more traditional ESL programs in their communities. So, whether a community college or otherwise. So our program is designed to be a safe place where these women, we do have some men in our program as well, but where these women can learn kind of quote school skills, where they're doing homework regularly, they're understanding kind of expectations about attendance and being on time and classroom etiquette. So things that may be expected of them, or maybe expected kind of implicitly through other programs. This is a place where they can cut their teeth a little bit, as a way of kind of then being able to springboard to other places where they can take more advanced classes. So the curriculum that we use for our program, for our English language learning program online, is English Unlocked, which is a curriculum that Literacy Minnesota published last year. And it's been great. It provides the levels that we need, kind of starting at the very, very basic level. And we can adapt it very easily. We also use the Ventures textbook series for our kind of higher level students. So each of these are great, not just because they can be used online pretty straightforwardly, but also because they have a life skills focus. And this is important because our mission is to eventually kind of push our students out of their comfort zone, out of some of the isolation that I mentioned previously, and into the community. So so for each of our classes, every session, they have 2 mini projects. This is kind of like just a small example of, what we are doing in particular. So we have these mini projects, which are designed not only to kind of apply language content to their life, but also to kind of, like I mentioned, kind of bring them out into the community and potentially, hopefully, bringing their children alongside as they do these projects. So, as a quick example, if they're learning about community places, for example, the bank or the park or a clinic, one example would be they would go and they take a picture of them at those places and with their children, ideally, and, write or kind of do an audio file using some of the target language of that particular unit. So that's kind of an overview of some of the ways that we are trying to tailor our program to our students. Thanks. So we're, as we go along, we kind of encounter a few really big barriers to English language learning, which I think maybe many of you may be kind of aware of already. But ours in particular are very vulnerable, and these things are very real, and keeping them isolated and dependent on family members or others to help them. So one of the biggest things is lack of transportation. So, a lot of these women do not have access to a car, or, they don't have the language ability or the confidence to access public transportation. So a few of the things that we try and do to address that is, for our placement tests, we conduct those online, in addition to our classes obviously being on Zoom. This year also, so SHC bought a bus, and the purpose of the bus is to bring programming for like our welcome workshops directly to the apartment complexes or kind of other community centers where many of our families live. So the bus can be adapted in several ways to host small classes. And so we're excited to kind of use that in more depth starting, this upcoming fall. Another big one, as I'm sure many of you are aware, is lack of childcare. So, because we're serving women and mothers of small children, that's usually a big one that prevents them from leaving the house in order to access English classes. So, this is kind of where we try and provide child-friendly programming, either through, we'll often have preschool trained folks to provide support with childcare during our welcome workshops when, in the in-person format. And obviously the online English classes, that are a shorter amount of time, enable women to learn while their children are still with them at home. And lastly, we have pretty low levels of digital literacy that, our students are displaying. So, most of these women don't have email addresses. Most of them don't possess kind of basic computer skills, which is definitely a challenge. So, as we've gone along, we've tried to address this through doubling down on communication methods that are already accessible and familiar to students. So WhatsApp is obviously something that almost all of them use already. And so we use that for, communication and posting homework. So we don't have a kind of traditional LMS where they're, kind of signing in and uploading documents, because that would, that's totally over their head. And so that's kind of, we're trying to have a kind of very low barrier to entry for a program. Tutors are actually also super important to help us address this barrier. You have many of the tutors who will be physically present with our students as they are learning to sign in to Zoom for the first few weeks of their classes and sometimes longer. So they, so thankful for them, as they help get students into our classes. Last slide. So basically, kind of our multi-generational approach is designed to be holistic and to meet, mothers and children, and their families where they actually are. So this means that we need to often examine and re-examine ourselves, as far as what our focus is, so that we are meeting them there. So, as I mentioned, we have a few programs that SHC, at SHC, and we need to make sure that our program goals are laser focused and targeted, because, we are still a fairly small organization and we can't do everything. We can't serve everyone. And so, if we tried to serve everyone, we would be spread really thin and not, no longer be able to be effective. So, last year we decided to just cut out 2 of the highest levels of our English program, because we found that students at that point were beginning to take classes in other programs. And we felt like they were ready to kind of graduate from our program. And we really wanted to focus on the moms who had just arrived with no English and were stuck at home. So that was a tough decision, because, again, we had to tell students no, who we really wanted to serve, but kind of in the long run serving our ultimate mission. So we try really hard not to replicate what other programs are already doing in our communities, but just to find those gaps and try and to fill them. Another big one that we focus on is coordination of service. So, obviously mothers and children need support in multiple different ways. And so, the ELO program and the tutoring program obviously work really closely together to identify needs. Obviously in class, they'll identify language needs, but also tutors are the eyes and ears of the program and can let us know if there are other issues that are arising, in families that we may be able to step in and connect them to other resources for. And lastly, time. We can't really get around it. The time that it takes. Obviously not all programs are able to do, what we do, because of the time it takes to connect to students. There's a reason why many of these, these students are not reached, because it takes a lot of proactivity on our end to make sure that they have, the attention that they need. And so, we try and do that as much as possible and communicate with them in ways that they understand. It can be messy, it can be frustrating, take a while. We can't do email blasts, like I mentioned, but it can be super rewarding, as we see these moms and their children succeeding in learning and adjusting and kind of succeeding in life in the US more generally. So yeah, so that's kind of an overview. So I guess now we have some time for questions and feedback. So I'd love to hear from you to hear what you have to say.
Feel free to drop any questions in the chat. Make sure you are putting your comments or questions to everyone, not just to hosts and panelists. So we have a question from Sharon. Sharon says, are your online classes open to students throughout Maryland?
Yes, they are. So we are one major source of our funding is from the Maryland Office of Refugees and Asylees. And so, you know, our even though most of our students are coming from Montgomery and Prince George's County, we do have people from other surrounding counties, including Baltimore County, you know, that far. So yeah, as long as they're a Maryland resident, we definitely have funding available for students to take classes with us.
Great. Garrett says, sounds like a great program. Anything like it on the Eastern Shore?
I wish I knew that, and I could definitely do some research, but I am less familiar with what's going on the Eastern Shore. So I apologize for that.
Joanna asks, how long have you seen it taking students to progress to the higher levels?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So, you know, like I mentioned, we have 4 beginning literacy levels, and the general expectation is, you know, because our sessions are 10 weeks long, that they will probably need to repeat at least one of those levels in the course of, you know, their time within the English Unlocked curriculum that we're using. So, you know, with the literacy itself, it will probably take a year to get through the material that we are teaching, and then we go through a ventures textbook. We go through one ventures textbook a year. So that would mean 3 or 4 years, depending on how the students are doing, to get completely through our program.
Garrett asks, how long are your class sessions? I know you mentioned they were a little shorter than maybe some other programs' classes.
Yes, so our English classes are 50 minutes long, and you know, as an ESL instructor, that seems like not enough time. And there's always a tension that I feel there, because I wish we could have, you know, much longer class periods, but you know, we have to go at the pace of what our students are realistically able to commit to. So we do actually have a citizenship program as well, and those are for slightly higher level students, but those classes are 2 hours long. And and they're twice a week.
Great. And I do actually, Joanna Winningham from the Office of New Americans at Maryland Department of Labor is here, and she's actually the connection. She connected us with Solutions in Hometown Connections. So we appreciate her. Yeah, Garrett, she said 50 minutes, yes, 50-minute classes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Tessa before we close out here? Yes. Thank you, Joanna. Well, I really appreciate, Tessa, your time, and it's exciting to hear what's happening through SHC and through your program. It's also great, you know, we have some of our Title II grantees that are nearby where you are, and so I just love the resource sharing and referrals that can happen back and forth between your organization and other organizations nearby as well. We thank you so much for being part of our Virtual Training Institute. Please don't forget that an evaluation will pop up on your screen after you exit the webinar. And we do have our closing final webinar for Virtual Training Institute and Adult Education and Family Literacy Week at 1:30. So we certainly invite you to join us. And I'll also mention that if you are a Title II grantee, we are looking to start a community of practice for family literacy staff and instructors. So I'd love to have your contact information and know who your instructors are so that they can be a part of it. We wish you all a wonderful rest of your afternoon. And thank you again for joining us. And thank you, Tessa.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.